New challenges for the most powerful Texan on Capitol Hill.
He's drawn a line in the sand, and right now I don't see a plan in place.
We'll get some insight from Senator John Cornyn on the work to stop a government shutdown. First, the race for the White House begins to take shape.
And I believe that I can win the nomination.
How some Texans are getting new attention in the run up to 2020. Hello and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Phil Prazen in for Josh Hinkle. Is it happening already? With the midterms behind us, some people are already looking ahead to the presidential election in 2020. And this week, one Texan made a move to set up his own run for the White House.
That's why I'm exploring a candidacy for President of the United States in 2020.
Former San Antonio Mayor Julian Castro announced on social media that he's creating a presidential exploratory committee. That's the step before launching a formal campaign, and he expects to face a lot of competition for the Democratic nomination.
The thing is that this year you're going to have a very talented field of people. You might have 24 people from all over the United States that are running. I think that's going to be fantastic, not only for Democrats, but for the country. And I have a strong vision for the country's future. And if I run, I look forward to making my case to the American people.
Castro says he expects to announce whether he's running for president on January 12th. One of the most influential advocacy groups in Democratic politics released their straw poll on the top 2020 contenders. Another Texan, though, came out on top. Beto O'Rourke led the straw poll of members of Move On. The poll shows the most popular candidates among liberals nationwide. The El Paso congressman was the choice of 16% of people polled, edging out former Vice President Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders finished third in the Move On poll. California Senator Kamala Harris and Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren rounded out the top 5. Julian Castro ranked 17th with less than 0.5% of support. For perspective, we turn to our roundtable. We're joined today by Alana Rocha from the Texas Tribune, Carlos Sanchez, politics editor for Texas Monthly, and John Moritz with the USA Today Network. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
So let's just start with the timing of this announcement by Julian Castro. What should we take about when he's announcing this?
I feel like Beto O'Rourke has been good about staying in the headlines since he narrowly lost to Ted Cruz, and Julian Castro has essentially been running for president for 2 years, and so I feel like this is just a natural stepping stone, and a lot of people are looking at the timing because, you know, it came within days of Beto meeting with former President Barack Obama, which got a lot of traction, but I don't think you can read too much into it. I just feel like it's his next logical step to a January 12th announcement.
And this is a basic question, but these exploratory committees, how many of these actually turn into presidential runs?
I think 114%. No, seriously. Announcements are just rollouts. You know, try to maximize a little bit of publicity, build up that name ID with each opportunity that's presented. I think this is one of them. Julian Castro didn't appear on the ballot in 2018, has never run statewide, so he really needs to reintroduce himself to the American voters past his appearance at the 2012 Democratic National Convention. 6-8 years is a real long time, especially in presidential politics.
So I was in El Paso for Beto O'Rourke's watch party election night, and so was Castro. I mean, what's the dynamic between those two in the past, and what should we take out of this?
You know, the interesting thing about Julian Castro is there was a push to get him to run statewide in this last election, and he deferred and received a lot of criticism for being indecisive. One of the reasons he gave for getting out ahead of the crowd was he wanted to be decisive. So that was just a push on that front. I think he has had it in his mind all along that he intends to run. Beto was an unexpected contingency that he must contend with. But I asked him shortly thereafter, his visit to El Paso, to what effect will Beto affect his decision ultimately, and he said he expects a large Democratic primary field, and his decision is not based on any other person or candidate's decision.
There was a poll that was released by Move On where Beto O'Rourke was up, and then Julian Castro was like 17th or something like that.
Like 26-1 or something. Yeah, I don't know if it's the same one.
So you know, what are we going to see from both of these candidates kind of moving forward to stay in the headlines?
Well, I think Julian needs to get out ahead, as he's doing now, to recapture some limelight. As John pointed out, he was the darling of the Texas Democratic Party for a while, and then suddenly Beto emerges, and he needs to figure out a way to do an end run around the spotlight that is on Beto right now.
Traditionally, in Democratic presidential party, Democratic Party politics, that first guy out of the chute isn't always, or the most well-known guy out of the chute isn't always the guy who walks away with the prize. See Obama, Barack, Clinton, Bill, Kennedy, and all the way back.
Yeah.
So being the guy carrying the ball, that guy's going to be the first guy tackled. So you know, if Beto appears to be a front runner now, he's going to have to run pretty fast. Yeah.
Also 2020 news, but on a Texas level, we have our Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick this week endorsing the sitting U.S. Senator John Cornyn, and there were somewhat whisper campaigns of, you know, Patrick being an option if there was a primary challenge. So why should Dan Patrick, you know, kind of do this announcement right now?
Quiet rumors that he was going to challenge, you know, John Cornyn in 2020. Another notable endorsement this week, of course, was the junior senator from Texas, Ted Cruz, posting a joint video, I think on YouTube or something, with Cruz or with Cornyn saying he fully supports him. Which the relationship there, you know, they've kind of not endorsed or said they were going to stay out of it for fellow senators and back and forth. And so the fact that he's throwing his support, I think he saw what, you know, acknowledge what happened in the last race of you know, him running statewide and narrowly winning.
Building off of that, with this last election being more competitive, do you think that will transfer over into the session and we'll see less Republican on Republican infighting, and they'll understand that they need to be on the same page?
The past several sessions, the legislature's always been about the March primary. The agenda was set, figuring out if we please our constituents, left and right, we'll be fine. Now we've learned that the session is also going to be driven by what happens in November's. So we might actually see a little bit more gravitation to the middle, something we've not seen since the very early 2000s.
Really?
Or tackling the issues that you expect the legislature to tackle, not the maybe, you know, social issues, but, you know, they're talking about school finance, they're talking about the budget, property tax reform, all that impact our wallets. And I think that resonates, you know, across party lines.
And I would venture to say that a kumbaya moment among Republicans in the legislature would be a disservice to Dennis Bonnen, who appears to be the next House Speaker. I think he needs to pick a fight early with either Dan Patrick or Governor Abbott to demonstrate to his chamber that he's got their back.
Carlos, Alana, John, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
Texas lawmakers seem ready to take on the challenge of school finance, but those big ideas will cost money.
I know a lot of people are talking about the Economic Stabilization Fund and the fact that we've got $12 billion in it, and maybe now is the time to start spending some of that.
We'll meet one new state lawmaker and hear her ideas for improving education in Texas. First, lessons learned from Hurricane Harvey lead to a plan to improve the way Texas responds to disasters. But find out why that plan could put a lot more power in the hands of Texas Aggies. Thousands of new tech jobs are coming to Texas, thanks in part to millions of dollars in incentives from the state. Governor Abbott joined leaders from Apple to announce plans for a new $1 billion campus in Austin. The new facility will be less than a mile away from Apple's existing Austin campus. Company officials say the new campus will bring in 5,000 more employees, with the possibility to grow to 15,000. Apple's expansion is getting a boost from the state. The company is getting money from the Texas Enterprise Fund, which pays incentives to bring business to Texas. Apple could receive up to $25 million in taxpayer-funded grants from the fund. Governor Greg Abbott's Commission to Rebuild Texas released a report with a variety of recommendations stemming from Hurricane Harvey. They include forming a recovery task force, adopting procedures to manage debris, and creating a case management program to better respond to individual needs. But then came this recommendation to move an entire agency.
One of the recommendations in the report is that the Texas Division of Emergency Management will be integrated into the emergency management functions currently performed by the Texas A&M University System. This will align emergency response, disaster assistance, and mitigation planning. As a first step in this process, Nim Kidd was recently hired as a vice chancellor at Texas A&M to begin fulfilling this mission.
If that becomes reality, that will put more power, influence, and resources under Chancellor of the Texas A&M system, John Sharp. Lawmakers are likely to consider the report's recommendation in the upcoming legislative session. A Texas congressman resigns after reports he used taxpayer money to settle a harassment complaint against him. That's okay under the law, but his former colleagues just took a big step to change that. Taking steps to stop a government shutdown.
Right now, we're all sort of wondering and waiting, how's this going to end?
We'll hear from the most powerful Texan on Capitol Hill about the work that needs to be done before the end of the year. Lawmakers in Washington passed new legislation to change how Congress handles harassment claims.
Without objection.
A bill known as the Congressional Accountability Act cleared the Senate on Thursday. It makes lawmakers personally liable for financial settlements from all types of harassment and retaliation cases against them. Up until now, taxpayer dollars have been used to pay those settlements. That was the case for former Texas Congressman Blake Farenthold. He stepped down earlier this year after revelations that he used $84,000 in public funds to settle a sexual harassment complaint against him by a former aide. His case and others inspired senators to file the Accountability Act. Time is running out for lawmakers in Washington to find solutions to avoid a government shutdown. That got even tougher this week after President Trump said he would welcome shutting the government down if Congress does not fund his border wall. That's putting new pressure on lawmakers, including Texas Senator John Cornyn. He's the #2 Republican in the Senate. Our Anna Wernicke caught up with Senator Cornyn to ask him about the work that still needs to be done in the Senate.
Senator, thanks for talking with us. I appreciate it. So let's first talk about the president earlier this week saying, threatening to shut down the government if Congress doesn't fund his border wall. Is there a plan in place to make sure the government doesn't shut down next Friday?
Well, border security is very important, obviously. Then the same organizations, criminal organizations that are bringing migrants across the border are bringing drugs and trafficking in human beings and the like. So I support the president's focus on border security, and I don't understand the reluctance to adequately fund it. But he's drawn a line in the sand, and right now I don't see a plan in place. It may come together magically. Hopefully it will in the Christmas spirit here soon. But right now we're all sort of wondering and waiting, how's this going to end? But I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Beyond the spending bill, what are you hoping to achieve in the lame duck session?
Well, we still need to confirm more federal judges. We just confirmed our 30th federal circuit court judge. I think that brings us to about 85 total so far, including 3 new judges on the 5th Circuit Court of Appeals and a number of Texas judges. We passed a farm bill. We passed an opioid bill to deal with the drug crisis facing America. 72,000 Americans lost their lives as a result of drug overdoses last year. We just held a very important hearing in the Judiciary Committee talking about the narcos who bring this poison into the United States and how that really represents the heroin part of it, part of the opioid crisis. So we've been pretty busy, and I think surprisingly productive. Obviously, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act has continued to produce benefits. The economy is growing. People are optimistic and confident once again. But there's a lot going on up here right now, and I'm happy to just have us settle some of these remaining issues and go home for Christmas.
Let's talk about your time in leadership. The House will change over leadership to the Democrats next year, so the time of Republican control is over. Were you able to achieve everything that you'd hope over these past 2 years?
Well, not everything, but it's been amazingly productive. It's going to be interesting to see what Ms. Pelosi decides to do. Obviously, we're in a run-up to the 2020 presidential election. It looks to me like everybody and their uncle is running for president on the Democratic side. We had 17 people running when President Trump was nominated and won, and they're going to have even more than that. So I hope we can still get some important things done, things like infrastructure, how to deal with the traffic and congestion. We still need to do some work when it comes to health care, bringing down premiums and drug prices. So I hope there's some things we can do working together. I certainly am going to try.
Ted Cruz and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick both endorsed you this past week. Were you surprised by the timing of this endorsement?
Well, maybe not so much. We've been talking about it. Of course, Ted and I have been working together on everything from Hurricane Harvey relief to working together on federal judges, and certainly I campaigned for him during his campaign, which was closer than any of us expected. But I think it's this midterm election that just passed sent a message to those of us who run for office in Texas that we can't become complacent. We need to not only be concerned about primary elections, we need to be concerned about general elections. A lot of new people have moved to our state from California and other places, and we need to be talking about the things that my constituents care about. So I'm glad to have the support of Senator Cruz and Governor Patrick, and I expect we'll get some more endorsements, but the one I'm hoping for the most is the endorsement of the voters.
Are you scared of any Democrats in 2020?
Well, this is my first rodeo, so I've been through a number of elections before. I think the most important thing is to be prepared, and we will be prepared. I think I've got a record to run on, and we're going to be talking about that, what we've accomplished, what we still hope to accomplish if I'm reelected in 2020.
Changes under the dome. New members come to the ledge with a mission.
I'm passionate about public education, and I just felt so strongly that somebody needs to get into the legislature to look out for AISD.
We'll introduce you to one new Texas lawmaker and how she plans to make a difference. We've been introducing you to some of the new people who'll be working for you in the Texas legislature. One of them is Vicki Goodwin, a Democrat who won House District 47 in Travis County. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I guess you knocked off an incumbent Republican to do that.
Yes.
How'd you do it?
A lot of hard work, a lot of going to meetings, getting out in front of voters as often as I could, doing as much block walking as I could. And I've been very involved in the community over the last 25 years. So I think that was very helpful. My kids went through Austin schools, and I was very involved with AISD as a volunteer.
Did you get, so in Travis, Williamson, Hays County, Democrats really overperformed historically. Did you catch any of that, or was this a Goodwin-Workman issue?
No, I certainly think Beto helped a lot. There was a huge enthusiasm for Beto O'Rourke in the district. So I certainly got some advantage and some help from that.
So what's it been like since the election day till today? What have you been doing? What have you been learning? Tell me about it.
Oh, it's been a whirlwind. Basically, the day after the election, we had a Democratic caucus meeting, and so that was nice. I got to meet many of the other Democrats who I'll be working with on the House floor. We talked about the speaker's race, then the speaker's race essentially took a different direction than we thought it might, but we've had a member orientation where we've learned a little bit about each of the topics that will be brought up in the session, a little bit about appropriations, public school finance, ethics rules, and got to meet other members. So it's been good.
So what are you going to bring to the table? What are your priorities coming into this?
Certainly school finance. AISD is in a tough situation with the school finance system that we have. They're having to dig into their reserves and talking about closing schools, talking about larger class sizes, which is just not the direction that we need to be going. So that's certainly top priority. I think mental health in the schools and working on school safety.
Now, these are big ideas. Big ideas usually cost money. Any conversations that you would like to have about how to pay for some of this?
Certainly, I know a lot of people are talking about the Economic Stabilization Fund and the fact that we've got $12 billion in it, and maybe now is the time to start spending some of that.
The rainy day fund for people who don't?
Right, the rainy day fund, which certainly will be using some for Hurricane Harvey and the rebuilding that still needs to be done for that. But I think that because it's at such a high level, we could perhaps use what might go into it in the next biennium and put that towards public education. We could also take some of what's in there, invest it, and have something like an endowment fund that would give us a long-term income.
Yeah, and so you mentioned the soon-to-be Speaker Dennis Bonnen earlier. Have you met with him? What's your first impression?
I have met with him and actually have a good first impression of him. He invited all of the freshman Democrats to come in and speak with him and spent a couple of hours with us. And then I went and met with him individually just the other day. And so, you know, he's listening to what our interests are, what our district priorities are, and so far, so good.
So he already has some Democratic support. I mean, do you see yourself voting for him when it comes in January, and do you think a lot of Democrats will?
I imagine so. Nobody else has really stepped forward since he announced that he's the likely speaker. So, you know, if there's nobody else to vote for, why would you not vote for him?
So I was covering the Capitol during the last legislative session. It can be somewhat of a mean, nasty, stressful place. I mean, this is obviously a financial and also a stressful toll on you. Why do this?
I'm passionate about public education, and I just felt so strongly that somebody needs to get into the legislature to look out for AISD, and the prior office holder was not looking out for AISD. So that is a big reason. I'm at a point in my career where, as a broker, I can hand off some of my business to the agents in my office. I can delegate and take some time off to, you know, serve my community.
Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Phil Prazen. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.